I'm Wayne Epps with the Richmond Times Dispatch here with another edition of Ram Talk with the RTD. In this second episode, we're going to kind of break down last week or VCU's past two games against Richmond and George Mason, both wins, and look ahead to a Saturday game at UMass. Last week's episode kind of led into the Richmond game, so the second game of this year's Capital City Classic Series. This one at the Siegel Center, and on a Friday night, ESPN Showcase game was a big time atmosphere. VCU's first sellout of the season, and the game, kind of lived up to the billing, especially in a close first half. Game tied at 28 through the first half. Um, but then the game sort of shifted completely in the second half, and then mostly by VCU just really stomping on the pedal offensively. Shot about 56% from the field in the second half, and a big part of that was big performances from Mikeal Brown-Jones and Ace Baldwin Jr. Mikeal Brown-Jones, sophomore. He hasn't gotten a lot of playing time this year. With me and Zach last week kind of broke down X factors of the season. We didn't really talk a whole lot about him, but I think he's proven to be a big time X factor. Against Richmond, and also we'll get to it, but against George Mason on Wednesday night, and against Richmond in just 11 second half minutes, he had a career high 11 points and a career high 7 rebounds just in that quick spurt. And VCU was able to really pull away from Richmond while continuing to defend well in that second half to win by 20. And so now VCU has won 6 of the last 7 against Richmond in the Capital City Classic. So, that was another big win, another needed win for VCU in this sort of urgent final stretch of the season. Um, Another player who played really well in that game was Jay Nunn, the freshman, who continues to show he can be a nice sort of ancillary scorer for this group. He had 9 second half points in the game as well. And when VC really pulled away was when with a 12-1 second half run to kind of put the game away, put the go up 17. That run included a pair of baskets from Brown Jones, and also Ace Baldwin and Vince Williams Jr. had threes each in that stretch as VCU sort of took his largest lead of the night to really kind of put the game away. And so with that momentum, VCU kind of rolled into another in-state matchup with George Mason coming to the town. That also was the second in the season series. VCU won by 15 up at George Mason a couple weeks ago. Mason came to the Siegel Center on Wednesday night, and it was senior night for Vince Williams Jr. and Keyshawn Curry. Both were honored before the game. Both members of you could say this current coaching staff's first full recruiting class, the 2018 recruiting class, and both of them kind of started very strong. Particularly Keyshawn Curry had 5 early points, and VCU jumped out to a quick 10-0 lead. But then what kind of hurt VCU throughout the first half, they had a couple extended scoring droughts, and the first one allowed George Mason to go on a 9-0 run and kind of make it a close game, and they remained pretty close throughout the remainder of the first half. And but VCU still carried a 5 point lead at the half. But then at a halftime, George Mason came out and was the aggressor, and they really kind of took it to VCU early. They ended up taking a 6 point lead, and you're kind of sitting there, and again, just talking about the urgency of these games. Like VCU can't really afford, really any bad losses, any losses down this final stretch of the season if it's going to, kind of continue to stay in the conversation for NCAA tournament at large consideration. So you're sitting there, they're down by 6 midway through the first half or midway through the second half. I'm sorry, and you're wondering if they're going to kind of be able to pull it together because it's a game that they definitely needed, and they did it in a big way. VCU kind of on a dime flipped and went on a 22-1 overall run, which finished with a 16-0 run to take the lead back, to go up big, and they kind of were able to hang on late when George Mason went on a late rally and cut it to 4 with under a minute to go, and so VC ended up getting what was a 6 straight win overall, improved it to 12-3 in A10 play. They're sitting there still tied for second place in the league with Dayton, who beat UMass on Wednesday night. So it was a needed win for sure. And a big part of it was Mikeal Brown-Jones having another big performance. He had 11 of his new career high 15 points in the second half, grabbed 6 rebounds. Ace Baldwin Jr. had another big night as well. He tied his career high with 18, and funny enough, he reached 18 for the first time in the game at George Mason a couple weeks ago. He had 18 again in the second game against George Mason on Wednesday night. He had 14 of that 18 in the second half, and at one point he scored 8 straight points in that 16-0 run that VCU had, and again they kind of took the lead for good with that run and held on late. So talking about the urgency of these games that VCU has at this point of the year. Joe Lenardi, the bracketologist for ESPN, put out his projections just earlier this afternoon, and he has VCU as sort of the next out right now. His sort of next four out right now are St. Bonaventure, UVA, Oregon, and Florida. And VCU is part of that next four out with the group that includes Virginia Tech, Kansas State, and Belmont. So I think the fact that they're in that conversation is big for VCU, but they obviously still have some work to do, and obviously still have to avoid a bad quality loss in these last three games. Again, they'll travel to UMass on Saturday, then they finish off with two big games next week against St. Bonaventure, who they lost by 20 back in January to, and then a big one at St. Louis on the road on March 5th. Really, if you look at it realistically, if you say a loss that VCU could afford, it's possibly that they won at St. Louis to finish the season. Obviously, for them, ideally, that you wouldn't have any losses, and they're able to kind of win out there, and that's the best possible position they could be in heading to the A10 tournament. They want to still be in in that bubble conversation, in that large consideration conversation. But if they lost to St. Louis and say make the A10 final, in DC next month, I think they still could be in that conversation come Selection Sunday. But they'll put themselves in the best possible place if they're able to win out. And I think if they win out in the regular season, even if they don't make the A10 final and avoid a loss on that first Friday of A10 tournament play, I think they would still be in pretty good shape for at large consideration. So I think the urgency is high right now, and they're kind of performing well with this urgency. With again having won six straight, I got a chance to ask the players about that, after the game last night, and Keyshawn Curry said that that they realize it's February, it's late February. When it gets to this time of year, they have to win. Like that's simply put, they just have to win. Is how he put it. And Ace Baldwin, he was asked about the standings and the A10 standings, and again, obviously they're still fighting for seeding here, tied for second place in the league with Dayton. And he said that they're not really looking at it too seriously right now, but that Coach Mike Rose kind of reminds them of where they are in the standings before each practice. So they're definitely cognizant of where they stand, and they're just a game back right now of Davidson of first place as well with these three games to go. So um, a regular season title is not out of the question still at this point either. But where they are, tied for second, at the very least, getting that top four seed and a double bye is definitely seems to be in good shape for that at this point. So it's been an interesting sort of final stretch of the year as VCU's kind of caught fire here. I think it's kind of been backed by a more consistent play on the offensive end, led by obviously the return of Ace Baldwin coming back late in non-conference play since he's been back, and throughout the duration of A10 play, they play a lot better on offensive end than they did early in the year, and backed by a defense that's been consistent from game one to now. They've been able to kind of heat up here and win these six straight. So that heads right into UMass, which VCU kind of has an interesting travel situation with this, where usually they'll get to their new destination or for a road game the day before, but they're actually flying out today on Thursday because of some winter storms set to hit Amherst. So they're going to end up spending an extra day in Amherst for that Saturday afternoon game, and it's going to be obviously again the urgency of this game in the picture of NCAA tournament consideration, but also it's a possible milestone game for Coach Mike Rose. He's one win away from 100 in his VCU head coaching tenure, now in his fifth year at VCU. As a head coach, obviously he had a previous tenure under Coach Shocker Smart as an assistant. So in these 5 years, he's right there knocking on the door of 100. So that's one thing to watch for on Saturday. But just again, also VCU just avoiding a negative loss is going to be the big key on Saturday. UMass has kind of struggled on the defensive end so far this year, but they've been very potent on the offensive end, averaging about 75 points per game this year, which is third overall in 18 play so far this year. We have multiple guys averaging double figures, led by Noah Fernandez. So they're a team that can definitely put up some points. So it will be a task for VCU defensively. But I think the big key is for VCU to kind of stay consistent on the offensive end, avoid some of those offensive lulls that they've found themselves in at certain points, like they did even in the win on Wednesday when they had a couple scoring droughts, and when they sort of fell into a lull late in the game and allowed George Mason to kind of rally late. Then that'll be the big key, especially on the road, to avoid a letdown there. But right now where VCU is, I think they're in pretty good shape to get a win like that on Saturday and then try to put themselves in good position heading into again a big final week of the season against St. Louis and against St. Bonaventure. So it's been a very interesting and wild sort of last couple months of the season here and a big February for VCU. Now sitting here at 19-7, 12-3, and 8-10 play, and we'll see if they're able to keep it up against UMass. And that game tips off at 4:30 p.m. on Saturday. I won't be there. I'll be covering that remotely. But you can find the coverage as always on richmond.com/sports. So thanks for watching, and I appreciate you following along.